Let's begin. The stories we are sharing today explore moments that irrevocably alter the course of a life. Our first account begins with a man who, after 2 decades of silence imposed upon him, is finally able to share what truly happened. My freedom came after 20 years behind bars, a sentence I served for the disappearance of my best friend. Back then, I tried to tell them the truth of what occurred that night, but my story was dismissed as fantasy. The pressure from the interrogation was immense, and eventually I broke. I confessed to a narrative they had constructed and offered no defense against their charges. Now, though the world I once knew has vanished, I am finally in a position to tell the real story. His name was Samuel, and we were inseparable growing up. We both had a history with minor offenses, nothing serious. We weren't robbing people or causing real harm. Our crimes were more about the thrill. We both came from comfortable backgrounds, so it was never about necessity. It was about the excitement of breaking the rules. Our favorite pastime was urban exploration, specifically breaking into abandoned buildings and construction sites. We had become quite bold, having never been caught. That streak of luck ended the night we decided to explore the old abandoned police station. The city had recently built a modern police headquarters just down the road, leaving the old one, a relic from the 1940s, completely empty. The town's growth had rendered it obsolete years ago. For Samuel and me, this deserted building, filled with decades of grim history, was an irresistible target. He brought along a cheap instant camera to capture some spooky photos, and we carried empty backpacks, hoping to find some unique souvenirs. Gaining entry was simple. The fence had barbed wire, so we used bolt cutters on the gate's chain to get through. The front door locks were old and gave way easily, and there were no alarms to worry about. Inside, we felt like kids who had broken into a forbidden playground. We sifted through old case files at the booking desk, made a mess in the sheriff's old office, and searched the armory for weapons. All we found were a few old wooden billy clubs. Then we discovered the holding cells. There were 4 of them in a row, with classic iron bars. And there, hanging on a hook on the opposite wall, was the ring of keys. A mischievous idea sparked between us. We started laughing, imagining the pranks we could pull. We decided to play a game, one of us the overbearing cop and the other the hardened criminal. We played rock, paper, scissors to decide the roles, and I won. Naturally, I chose to be the cop. I immediately slipped into character, barking orders at Samuel, who played along, pretending to be in handcuffs as I directed him into a cell. I slammed the heavy gate shut behind him and turned the key in the lock. I could see a flicker of real concern in his eyes, a worry that I might actually abandon him there, but he masked it well. Our friendship was built on a lifetime of trust, so I knew he wasn't genuinely afraid. Still, I wanted to tease him. I told him to enjoy rotting in his cell and walked away, heading back to the sheriff's office where I propped my feet up on the desk. After a few minutes, Samuel started yelling, playing his part. "You better let me out of here, you filthy pig." His voice echoed eerily down the concrete hallway. "Be quiet, you scum. You'll get out when you make bail," I shouted back. He laughed and replied, "You never said a bail, you jerk." I couldn't help but smile. "That's because your money is all dirty." "No, it isn't. You can't prove that," he retorted. "Not yet," I yelled back. Then there was silence. A moment later, his tone shifted completely, all traces of the game gone. "Hey man, for real, let me out now. I don't like it in here anymore." A cold dread washed over me. I recognized the genuine fear in his voice. I jumped up from the desk and ran back toward the cells to let him out. But when I arrived, the cell was empty. The iron door was still securely locked, but Samuel was gone. Panic set in. I fumbled with the keys, unlocked the door, and searched inside, checking under the small cot. He was nowhere. "Samuel!" I screamed his name. "Where are you?" Only the sound of my own voice answered, bouncing off the walls. Then I heard the heavy cell door begin to slide shut behind me. I lunged for it, trying to stop it, and managed to get my hand in the way just as it closed, crushing my wrist with incredible force. I yelled out in pain and fought to pull the door open again. It felt like something was fighting me from the other side, an unseen force pushing it closed. When I finally broke free, I was consumed by terror and adrenaline. I didn't search for Samuel. We had a pact. If a situation ever got truly bad, it was every man for himself, and we'd meet up later, but I never saw Samuel again. The days turned into weeks. The police investigation into his disappearance led them directly to me. From there, the story writes itself. The evidence was all circumstantial, but it all pointed to me. I took the fall, and while I know I am not guilty of what they accused me of, I've always felt that the blame was mine to bear. Whatever force took him that night, it nearly took me too. There are days I wish it had. The echoes of that abandoned station still haunt the first narrator. For our next storyteller, a retired sheriff's deputy, the ghosts are of a different, but no less tragic, kind. He shares a memory from one single day on the job that has stayed with him for years. During my career as a sheriff's deputy, I witnessed things that have left permanent marks on my psyche. I could rarely discuss these experiences with anyone outside of my wife or a few trusted colleagues. Now in my retirement, I decided to document the calls that have lingered the most. This is one of them. It wasn't a surprise call. In fact, we had been waiting for the opportunity to address this particular problem for months, held back only by the need for a warrant. The issue was a derelict house in one of the neighborhoods on our patrol route. The original owners had passed away without any heirs, so the property was repossessed by the bank. They let it sit and decay for far too long until it reached a state of near collapse and was slated for demolition. We finally obtained the warrant after a contractor, sent for a pre-demolition survey, burst into our station, pale and trembling. Based on his frantic report, we had a clear picture of what we were walking into. It was, by all appearances, a classic drug house. We anticipated finding narcotics, squatters, and unregistered firearms, and we found all of those things. We were ready for arrest. But nothing could have prepared us for the true horror within. We established a perimeter around the house with 8 patrol cars and a SWAT van borrowed from the neighboring county. It was broad daylight, yet the people inside seemed completely oblivious. I was positioned a few men behind the SWAT team as they announced our presence and then breached the front door. We gave them maybe 15 seconds from the first shout to the door caving in. That brief warning was enough to send a few occupants scrambling for the back exit, where other officers were waiting to intercept them. The SWAT team's aggressive entry neutralized any thought of resistance from those who remained. By the time I entered, about a dozen individuals were already on the floor, motionless. My job wasn't to cuff them yet. Officers behind me handled securing them with zip ties. The ground floor was clear, but the house was not. There was a basement. While the team upstairs processed the scene, I and my partner followed the armored SWAT unit as they carefully descended the stairs. My heart was pounding, a familiar feeling during any high-risk raid. I could feel the sweat soaking my uniform, my senses on high alert. But as we went down those stairs, the atmosphere shifted palpably, the SWAT team slowed, and a primal sense of wrongness made my skin crawl. The space was unnervingly quiet, a stark contrast to the noise upstairs. Then a smell hit me, a foul organic stench that was horribly distinct. I tried to push the recognition out of my mind. Suddenly the SWAT team was yelling. A large man was desperately trying to squeeze through a small basement window to escape. He was stuck. Before he could free himself, my partner and I rushed forward, grabbed his legs, and pulled him back inside. He crashed to the floor, and we quickly restrained him. Moments later, the all-clear was given for the basement. It was time to start processing the scene and the suspect. I was trying to distract myself, complaining to my partner about the effort it would take to haul the heavy man upstairs. He never got a chance to reply. One of the SWAT members suddenly lost control. He ran to the subdued man, grabbed him by his shirt, and started screaming in his face, his voice raw and broken. "What is wrong with you?" he growled, sounding like he was about to weep. The man on the floor just spat blood onto the SWAT member's visor. Instantly, the SWAT officer reacted, striking the man in the head with the butt of his rifle, knocking him unconscious. I am certain he would have continued to beat him, possibly to death, if the rest of his team hadn't intervened and pulled him away. My knees felt weak. I knew I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. That stench, the one I had tried to ignore, was one I had recently become familiar with. My first son had been born just a few months earlier, and the smell of a neglected diaper is unmistakable. The SWAT team led their distraught colleague upstairs, leaving my partner and me with the unconscious suspect. It was then that my surroundings came into sharp, horrifying focus. The cramped, filthy basement was lined with cribs, 6 of them. We looked inside, and the sight has given me nightmares ever since. Inside each crib were children, some with more than one, ranging in age from newborns to toddlers. They were all in severe distress, living in their own filth. We hadn't heard them over the raid. because their cries were silenced by pacifiers forcefully tied across their mouths with cords that cut into their small faces. Some were even restrained with bungee cords. I felt dizzy, my sense of reality buckling. I could vaguely hear my partner calling for medical assistance on his radio, but my training abandoned me. My only instinct was to lift the tiny, squirming baby in the nearest crib. I carefully removed the gag so they could finally let out a wail of pure agony. I held the child, trying to offer some small comfort. This was the scene my fellow officers discovered when they rushed down the stairs. The investigation later revealed that the drug-addicted squatters had created a grotesque makeshift daycare in the basement. They imprisoned their own children there so they could use drugs upstairs undisturbed. All the children were placed into state custody. We never saw them again, but I am certain that every officer on that scene thinks about them and wonders what became of them. I know I do, every single day. From a haunting of the past to a trauma that creates a haunting future. Our final story is a cautionary tale from a young man whose life was derailed by a single night and an unforgiving system. In the early weeks of the lockdown, life was surprisingly good for me. I had just started dating my girlfriend, and with everything shut down, we had endless time to get to know each other. I had also recently gotten my driver's license, so we had a newfound sense of freedom. We were at the end of our senior year of high school, both having just turned 18, with very few real responsibilities. We would drive through the empty streets, just enjoying the quiet and each other's company. We often searched for quiet, out-of-the-way places where we could be alone, hidden from view. I'm sure you can guess why. Unfortunately, this simple pleasure would bring our good times to a devastating end. It still feels so profoundly unjust that I get angry just recalling it. But since I can't change what happened, I feel I should share my story as a warning. It's a reminder that some police officers can be relentless and seem to take pleasure in ruining a life over minor infractions. It was a Friday night. We were parked in the back lot of a local park near our school. It was always dark there, and we felt completely secluded. Earlier, I had bought a cheap bottle of cinnamon whiskey and a small amount of cannabis to make the night feel special, since all the days were starting to blend together. Another piece of the puzzle was our social lives, or lack thereof. We had been ignoring our friends to spend time together, and my girlfriend's friends were particularly upset about it. One of them called her that night, asking where she was and giving her a hard time. What we didn't realize was that they were so resentful that they decided to report us to the police, falsely claiming I was a drug dealer. We were oblivious. After the call, we took a walk in the park, shared the joint, and finished the bottle. We then returned to my car, climbed into the back seat, and began to get intimate. We were in the middle of everything when I caught movement in my side mirror. 3 police cars were silently pulling into the lot, their lights off. They boxed my car in, eliminating any chance of escape. I froze, then quickly told my girlfriend what was happening. We scrambled to get our clothes on, but it was hopeless. The officers were already at the windows, banging on the glass and flooding the car with their flashlights, exposing us completely. They yelled at us to get out of the car. While we were still trying to cover ourselves, we were terrified and panicking, so we complied. The moment I opened my door, a large officer pulled me out and threw me onto the pavement, cuffing me instantly. My girlfriend started screaming and refused to leave the car after seeing what they did to me. The other officers reached in and forcibly dragged her out. I could only see the ground, but I heard her struggling and sobbing as they cuffed her too. They positioned us under their spotlights, ensuring any neighbors woken by the commotion would have a clear view of our humiliation. Then the interrogation started. I was in such shock I couldn't think straight about what to say or not say. They proceeded to search my entire car while we lay on the ground. They found the empty bottle and the remaining cannabis. I immediately took responsibility for both to protect my girlfriend from more trouble. They gave me a breathalyzer test. Since I was under 21, any detectable amount of alcohol meant an automatic DUI charge, even though I was parked. My license, which I'd had for only 3 months, was revoked on the spot. I was also charged with drug possession for the cannabis. Because the park was closed after dark, we were both charged with trespassing. But the worst was yet to come. Because we were caught in a sexual act, we were both charged with indecent exposure and committing a lewd act, and those charges stuck. As a result, both of us are now registered sex offenders for the rest of our lives. All because we were 2 consenting young adults in the back of my car, which had windows so dark I was sure nobody could ever see in. especially at night. You might think some of these charges would be dismissed, but the officer who pulled me from the car seemed to take a special pride in the arrest. At our court date, he presented the case as if I were a hardened criminal. He listed the open container violation, the DUI, the drug possession, the trespassing, the bogus tip from our friend, and even added resisting arrest. The judge bought it all. At 18 years old, I was sentenced to 6 months in jail and years of probation. The only small mercy was that my girlfriend was spared jail time, and since she was also 18, I avoided a far more serious statutory charge. However, the trauma of the event was too much for her. She broke up with me while I was serving my sentence. It's a harsh lesson that some officers will use any pretext to inflict maximum damage, so please be careful out there.